where a Gen Xer and a millennial share the strength-based perspective through which they view the world. We are your hosts, Allison and Tess. And lucky for me, Tess arrived and landed safely, part of the travel nightmare that you all have probably seen on social media. Hopefully you weren't in it. Poor Tess was. So welcome home, Tess, and I'm grateful that you created space to record when you probably just need a long nap and maybe a giant glass of wine.
Yes.
You can pour one. You can pour one if you want.
Yeah, let's just pause right here. So
Permission.
Yes. Thankfully I did sleep in today because I got in at 11 or like a little bit before 10 my time here, and then I don't know what it is. We can strength spot. I realize this is not normal for most people. I unpack immediately when I get home.
So do I.
No matter what time of day I get back.
So do I.
Okay. Yep. I was talking to Ryan about this, and he does not. And I know Alex does not. Like, people in my life that don't do that. And no matter what time it is, I unpack everything. If it's early enough, I do a load of laundry right away. In this case, I was coming from my parents, where I got to spend many an extra day because of being stranded and not being able to get back home. And so I did my laundry before I came. But get my mail, all these sorts of things, like to feel settled. And so I didn't get home with public transportation and waiting for my bag and everything until a little bit before 11. And so I didn't go to sleep till 1 because I was, doing all the things to get back and get settled. And so I don't know what that is. Is that the strategic that we both share? Is that,
I wish people could see, and they do, I guess, if you follow us on Instagram, you see the aesthetics that are always part of Tess, and they're very clean, very clean lines aesthetic. Yeah. I can't stand having crap around. I just can't stand it. And I think, one of the things that we've talked about here a few times, the shift of container. When we are in containers for a bit that we are not in control of, and then we come back to a container in which we can control. I don't think it's strength spotting for me to say that we're both a little bit of control freaks, but
yeah, you're probably right. I just feel so much more comfortable at home, and yeah, and so it's weird. My parents' place was my home at one point, which is an interesting shift, but it isn't, right? Like, they're everyday. I don't, quite feel comfortable in the same way that I do, right? That anybody does probably in their own home. So.
And you have a Ranger high, right?
14. So.
Okay, so in the middle.
High. Mm-hmm.
Well, that strength I'm just really becoming fond of and wish I had more of it, because I think it does so many things. It lines things up, but it also knows what to pull in, and I think people with higher Ranger are just the maestro of containers. Yeah. They love the container store. They love the fridge business.
Yeah.
What?
I think, okay, so for me, this is a good thing to point out with the aesthetics. So the aesthetics comes from adaptability.
Yes.
Part of this definition and part of the longer form report of adaptability is like an appreciation for like art museums and your spaces being arranged a certain way, because people with high adaptability, number 2 for me, are hyper aware of the present. Right? Like, they know where people are at if they're around people, right? They know where everything was that they, have within, I'm not going to show you the rest of my apartment because I'm still unboxing things and haven't fully gotten everything resettled, even though it's unpacked. Like, so it's just a bit, a bit much over here, but an awareness of where everything is at in the present moment. And so there's a bit of maybe that, plus having high strategic for me, number 3, could come across especially a lot like a Ranger with that combination. But it's a different motivation, right? Like a Ranger, right? Being focused on like loving the organization, like that, like the container store, I organize my fridge, but I don't need it. I organize it for aesthetics. So everything looks the same way and the labels are turned right. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I like, right? Rather than like everything having its place. Like, shift things around so things are in different places, which probably is not what an arranger would like.
Well, I was thinking first maybe a little bit of context, but when you talk about shifting it around in different places, that adaptability would love, I think, a little bit of that mix. So I think I just strength spotted that we're both control freaks who like to control our space. And that might be why. Also, I think for me, it's just, I want to be at ease after I travel. So if I see something that's on a to-do list, which is unpacking, I don't feel at ease.
Yeah.
So I know that we aren't even starting the new year, but I have a lot of thoughts on the new year topics for Genn and Millie.
Yeah.
Logistics, travel logistics could be an entire episode with what we've learned this past week, but also just how our strengths show up in all of these different situations. We talk about transition, but I think we make assumptions that transition means a complete, like a move or a, shift in a relationship, a marriage, a divorce, a new job. But our containers are shifting all the time. And what that does to flex a strength in a different way. I think when I am back in Nebraska, my input shows up differently and it falls into previous uses. It's like a comfortable chair, and here it's very, very different the way that I use my input because this is still newish space to me. Yeah. So more to come, listeners, from the dialogues that never cease to amaze me, and apparently people still listen. So
that's a thing. Oh, goodness.
So we are going to, it's the end of the year. It's in Allison's favorite days. I can hardly just be in these days without clapping and spinning around.
Yep.
I love these days. I just love these days. So I'm in deep reflection, but also pondering about what's ahead. It's this duality of the end and the beginning. And how often do we get that? So these have always been my favorite days. If you're new to Genn and Millie, Allison loves New Year's Eve. If you're not new to Genn and Millie, welcome back.
You know the drill.
You know the drill. I love these days. So I have been reflecting a little bit around the highlights of last year.
Awesome.
What I thought we would do is just talk about our word of the year and kind of frame some of the highlights that came about.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll share a few, expecting you to not fully be actively listening because you should be thinking about your own reflections, because we did not do a lot of space for reflect, and I did this morning. So when I think about chapter, the most important part of this year and the big aha that I had this morning is this was a new chapter for me because this was the first year I can truly say with confidence that I made and kept promises to myself. Part of that came from some great reading that I did. Part of that came from some great therapy that I had. Part of that came from 360 feedback. Part of that came from a lot of dialogues that we had in the Genn and Millie container space. But I truly made and kept some promises to myself. I took on a new role in an organization I've been part of for a long time that I could really never have imagined as 34-year-old me coming on to the team. And I'm abundantly grateful for that. I led my first retreat in Virginia, and that was pretty magical. I gave my very last new mentor training, something that I, could do in my sleep and did multiple times a week through a lot of my career, and handed that over to a new team that felt really good. I am abundantly proud, as I mentioned to you, of where DEI and the DEI committee in our organization has come. I'm very proud of two individuals in particular, Shaylee and David, who presented to our staff day. They're now familiar with Allison Mom Face beaming where I can't even speak.
It's the best.
I couldn't even help. I just couldn't even talk. And all of that came from slow movement, experience, and time. All of those examples came from many chapters that I had to live and experience and grow in and embrace to get to this new one. I watched my kiddos graduate and move and choose amazing, significant others to start life with, and they both love their jobs. They both love their jobs. I experienced a lot of travel. I went to Seattle for the first time. I went to Pittsburgh for the first time. I went to Snowmass for the first time, and I went to Estes for the first time, and I went to Cabo for the first time. So there was some first time travel experience all over the map there. Totally. That happened for me. I made a significant purchase with a vehicle all by myself, and I had never ever done that before. And Bernie, the Bronco, is serving me really well. I was asked recently if she was 4-wheel drive, and I could not answer.
Solid.
I'm not even sure, but I love her. I love her dearly. But I think the most important thing to me is all of the things that I tried for the first time this year. I tried snowshoeing. I tried stand-up paddleboarding. I did a river kayak adventure with my teammates team. I hiked St. Mary's Glacier 3 times, twice in the dark. And just recently, this last week, I learned how to cross-country ski. Did a lot of new things and tried new things that I had never done before, which is a new chapter for me, to be really open to the learning and the experience and saying, you know what, I may not be good at this, but I'm going to give it a go, and if I fall, I fall. I spent time better, and most of that was with myself and for myself. I went to 25 shows, fingers crossed, 26 on Friday for the year. The Roots show got canceled because of travel issues, Tess. So I'm one less concert. 25 shows, and majority of those I went by myself. My favorite one being taking Sean to see the Black Keys as a reminder of his very first concert. And that kiddo gave me some of the best feedback ever when he said, Mom, my music was influenced by you. I am grateful that you handed me the CDs and made me the playlists, and great feedback. I spent time with an old friend, Miranda, who I got reconnected with, and that there was a lot of learning in that as to the assumptions that you make about why a connection pauses, and then what happens when it gets plugged back in. I surprised my lifelong friend Sherry, which is the hardest thing I've maybe ever done, to pull off a surprise like that. She is really hard to surprise, and it took heavy-duty trickeration from many people. And I spent some really quality time with my family, really quality time with my family this year, particularly in the latter half of the year. So when I look back on this chapter, I think in this Word of the Year chapter, I think I kept some promises and some vows to myself. I didn't get to all my promises. I still have a tattoo to do. I still have some things to finish, but I'm proud of the promises that I kept to myself. So I'm going to pause there. I want us to talk about how we track, so don't let me forget that. But those are some reflections that I have. So I would love to hear the reflections of Tess's tutu.
Oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful list, and I wish I sat down to write one myself this morning. As this would literally just be verbally processing. Stream of consciousness here, which
that's my favorite version of you.
It's my least comfortable in most terrifying version, and it's very, I don't like it. It's not my favorite version of me. But anyway, so here she is. So I, let me walk back through the year. I completed my first year of my doctorate this year. I had a lazy summer for the first time in my life, in my recent life. I'm sure I did when I was a kid. Lazy summer. I'm using that in a not a negative way. I worked for my mentor and my advisor, and it's the same workload I have during the school year. And I took 2 classes and I did a workshop, but it was a much, much lighter workload. So when I say lazy, I mean I had an enjoyable summer. I had a not busy summer. I did not full summer. And lazy in a very positive way, because I don't recall in my entire adult life a time of laziness, a period of that much laziness where I've had that much downtime to fill it how I want to. So I did a lot of exploring and a lot of prioritizing my physical well-being. I worked out a lot this summer, and I moved to a new apartment, which I love, and explored my new neighborhood and started dating, which was crazy. And so it just was kind of a great summer. My siblings came to visit, and it was the first time the 3 of us have ever spent that long together without my parents. And the first time all 3 of us have spent that long together as adults. And it was really awesome, and I learned a lot about them, and I think they learned a lot about me. It was really fun to have them stay with me. I got to be in the inaugural iteration of a workshop that utilizes research methods for revolutionary change, not as agents for maintaining the status quo. And being a part of that inaugural class, I am getting to help formulate what that looks like in the future, and it was really liberating to be a part of a group of scholars that want to use research to make the world a better place, not just to build up their CVs. I got the opportunity to do incredible research with partners like the NAACP and the ACLU and MIT. And these just, I got to go to the Congressional Black Caucus, which never in a million years would I have ever thought that I would get to attend be in a room of that many powerful leaders in our country. And that was incredible. I took my qualifying examinations, and as of yet, I still don't know if I've passed yet. I still haven't got my results yet. So maybe I'm very doubtful if I will get them by the end of the year, but at this rate, I really invested in new friendships here, and my new relationship. Not really new anymore, kind of new, not new. And so just spent a lot of time investing in relationships while continuing to ensure that my relationships that I had prior to my move were, are still cultivated and still prioritized as well. Let's see. I taught my very first class, very first college class, I guess. I got to guest lecture a class for statistics. Let's see. Yeah, and I think, I don't even think I mentioned it before I started walking back through my year in my brain. My word of the year was equilibrium, and
That's why I pushed on lazy.
Yeah.
That's why I pushed on that.
It was a good push. It was lazy in a very positive way, because I've never been able to use that adjective in my own history that I recall, as an adult. I've never used that adjective. And so to get to, I intentionally was that's how I want to describe it, because it felt like that, and it felt really good. And yeah, so this word of the year, I think, as I'm just continuing to not be very eloquent and have the stream of consciousness
It's
here.
actually beautiful.
I think this year, while there are definitely times I felt the pressure of my program and being in my position and early in my academic career, there's a lot of expectations of and a lot of kind of benchmarks you need to meet in order to be successful in your academic career. And so I have felt a whole lot of pressure, more than I did last year, more than I have probably. I don't know, I felt pressure in other ways in different contexts, but it's a different kind of pressure when this is really what I want and what I've been working for a long time. So it's felt overwhelming at times, but I think I've had these buffers, which was the whole point of the commitment to equilibrium, when I feel out of balance or I feel like I'm putting too much into my work, too much time and energy and too much of myself and my soul into it, to have these buffers that help me to pull back and to know that every choice that I make to worry about that or to stress about that or to spend time doing that is brain space and heart space and life space that I am choosing not to give elsewhere. And so, yeah, I think my friendships and my relationship and my continued personal commitment to my physical well-being, like I've committed to, like I'm like signed up and a member of a bar studio, which I don't know if I've ever mentioned that on here, but I'm doing bar pretty regularly, and it's because I think I have high strategic and probably that adaptability. It may be like the learner too. Group fitness classes, like I'll do a few, but I won't like I'd rather just like read a book on the elliptical, and that's like a little less disciplined, as discipline is 34 for me. So I signed up and I've been doing bar consistently this entire year because I started last fall doing it, and just took a class this morning, and so I think things like that, things like spending time with Ryan or spending time with my friends, going to bar class, and then reading for fun, reading fiction, are all things that, apart from people, I mean, working out, reading, there are things I have easily and could have easily slashed from my life. Like, I don't need to work and, work out. I'll be fine. I walk and I bike to campus, or, I can't read for fun. I don't have the time to do it because I have all this stuff to read for school. And I feel like I've always been okay at prioritizing time-wise with my relationships, because those are really important. But these other things in my life that I just am really okay setting aside because of the season and because of, my other priorities, things like spiritual direction. And I started doing therapy regularly again this year. And I don't know, as I was thinking about reflecting on this year and journaling about it a little bit a few days ago, my first inclination was to feel like guilty, because there were several times throughout the year that I forgot what my word was. I mean, literally had to be like, gosh, what was it again? Like, and I have these like huge, right? Like, okay, yes, I'm getting there. I've had these huge, stop, like, let me process.
My hand motions.
Yes, oh my gosh. But I've had, like, when I think about it and like compare it to previous years, I've had these major milestone years and these words of the years that were so like if I think about my life as like a cup of water, like it was the first layer at the surface, right? Like it was always right there, like this concept of waiting well as I discerned, however many, what was that, 4 or 5 years ago, as I discerned what I wanted to do. And then this idea of hope in the midst of the pandemic, right? Like that I didn't, it was so palpable and so present. It was like tattooed on my forehead all the time, these words of the year. And equilibrium was not like that this year for me. Like I wasn't constantly meditating on the word the same way I have in previous years. But as I've been reflecting, it's because I've been embodying the word more. Like I haven't deliberately been thinking about it, nor have I reminded myself of it, because it's just become now a part of my habit to balance things better and to make these decisions that are more about what's going to be best for me as a whole person rather than what's going to be best for me as a future professor, right? Like making these decisions now, I know it just have become so routine and so a part of the year because of the context, because of these environmental factors that I didn't plan for nor anticipate. But it's allowed me the practice of actually living a life that has equilibrium, that has balance, that has healthy boundaries with work. That I didn't intentionally seek out, but kind of found me. And I think that's the serendipity of the word of the year, that, and also, I don't know, just something I've really been thinking about as I've been comparing it to previous years, that it was less, it wasn't percolating on the surface like other words had throughout previous years. But that's because I think it sank really deep, really early in the year and just sat there.
I know you don't like it when I say the word chooses you, but before we started today, my thought was, I know that you like to have, I know that you do not like it when I say, and off the cuff, let's go. But what it forces you to do is get out of your head and into your heart. And that is truly, if I look at what you did this year, Tess Starman got out of her head and got into her heart, and I witnessed it. And that is magical. It is. It's magical. Mm-hmm. I mean, I wish y'all could hear us in the green room, but like the words giddy, and I mean, I'll describe them. She won't like the words, but she beams, she radiates light, and it's because she's in her heart space. Mm-hmm. And when you know somebody, mostly for their head space, and you see them step into their heart space, you just, so when I ask you to not overthink it, and it just flows out of your heart, I hope you'll listen back because you explained your year beautifully. Also, your context is a superpower. If you said to me, hey, what happened last year? I'd be like, what year is it? I look back in my notebook to see how many times I wrote the wrong date. I just can't look back and reflect. My input needs the time to think about what happened and to track it. I think this year, your heart tracked your path. And that's why you forgot about what the word was.
That's super cheesy. I'm sorry. I just gotta know that.
Whatever.
Your heart tracked your path.
It did. You know what? One day you will quote the crap that I say and say, remember when Allison said, your heart tracked the path. I am loving witnessing you in heart space. Okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
Let me celebrate it, please.
You can absolutely celebrate it. I'm sorry. I don't mean to put you in a space of not feeling like you can celebrate it. I think the thing, though, is that I have always lived in heart space. I mean, my strengths are, out of my top 10, 6 out of 10 in strategic thinking. The other 4 are relationship building. Mm-hmm. And so I live very much in heart space, but I don't think I have felt the safety nor ability nor the desire to share that as openly as I feel like I have this year. It's always been there. It's always been there. But there's a little bit more of a willingness to share that.
Cheers to that. So I know you didn't like your heart tracked, so I'm going to give you a couple other examples of ways. So I would like our listeners also to ponder this question, and I bet there was a collective eye roll that moved like the way the butterfly causes a hurricane. A collective eye roll when Allison said your heart, track the way, whatever I said. The listeners that we have probably rolled their eyes too, Tess. So
not everyone.
Collective
Probably
eye
many
roll.
were writing it down as a catchphrase to quote Alia. There might have been. I just want to give you some grace. Your words are very beautiful. Some of them are not words that I would choose, and that's okay. We're different people.
We are. So I was looking back to try to kind of search for where did I track my year, because I didn't keep it in a format that was easily related to goals or outcomes. I did a lot of floating this year in that space of honoring my own promises. And I read, 12 books, which isn't a lot compared to you and a lot of you stellar readers. But I read 12, and that's a lot for me. And the majority of them were fiction, which I loved getting lost in a book again. And my favorite book was A Sentence by, I knew I should write it down. Evelyn something, I think. Maybe not. Elaine something. Anyway, the book is called The Sentence. I talked about it on a previous episode. It's a great read, a harder read. It really got me in that get lost in a book space. So I looked at Goodreads. That's how I realized how many books I read. I looked at Goodreads.
Yeah.
That's how I tracked it. I tracked my concerts on Twitter. The only reason I have used Twitter this entire year is to keep track of how many shows I went to. And I look back, and that was the only reason I used Twitter last year. So this next year, I'm not keeping track of how many shows I'm going to anymore. No more math on that. I'm just going to go when I want to go, and I'm not going to keep track. And I am going off the Twitter. Wow. Sayonara. Music tracking, concert tracking device. I used photos to track my experience in nature, so my iPhoto is full of that. And I used Facebook, I think, to mark my travel. So when I was looking at how I tracked, I don't like the word goals, and I don't really like getting too into that, but when I look back in reflection, those were spots that I could go to that were reminders of the things that I had accomplished.
That's good.
How do you track, you think?
Well, most certainly Goodreads, my books.
You also use the Insta for that, and I love how you do it, because it's like brand.
Yeah.
You have a brand.
I don't post everything I read on Instagram. Fun fact.
Wow, you read a hell of a lot then.
I read a lot. Yep. I don't post everything. There are some things I choose not to post, but most things that I post, I read, most things that I read, I post on there. But, so tracking my books on Goodreads, and I think, I used to physically track my books, before I started tracking on Goodreads a few years ago. And, I really enjoyed that. I wanted to, find out how much I was reading every year. And so, and it's only recent, probably the last 5 years, I've really tracked what I've read, because I just have always read and I've always loved reading. And so, before that, I didn't even really track it. But somebody asked me, because I was always reading, and I was like, I'm kind of curious. So I started a few years ago, and I think 3 full years now I've been on Goodreads. So I have a little bit of a history of my reading there. Apart from that, I don't know that there's anything I deliberately count or keep track of, in that same way of knowing how many concerts I attended or how many trips I went on or things like that. Like, I'm sure I could go back. I love to take pictures of things too, and so I definitely could go back to my camera roll. I think the biggest thing, the first thing that really came to mind was journaling. Like I journal a lot, and I think this year's journals, in line with my equilibrium and leading more with heart, has been much more focused on talking through friendships and relationships and things like that than recalling events. I've journaled a lot more about how I'm feeling and how I'm responding to things and where I'm at with certain things and with certain people than, not that it was a rote, recitation of events in my journal before. There's been a lot of that throughout, but I think before it was, this is how the day went, or this is how this trip went, and this is what I did, and now it's a little more of, this is who I was with, and this is how I felt, and this is what I'm frustrated by, and some of that stuff would come out for sure, but I think if I were to break down and do a thematic analysis of my journal content, I just think the proportion of how and what I'm writing about would look really different if I were to break that down from this year versus previous years. So
I didn't write very much this year. And is it Mari Andrew, the author we both like? I cannot. Mari. Anyway, she wrote a piece called that she tracks her failures over the year, and that's how she celebrates reflection, as she tracks her mistakes and her failures and celebrates those. And one of the things that I did a little but not well was my stories writing. And so I think something to reflect on for our listeners are also some of the things that maybe you had good intention about but didn't.
Yeah.
Or maybe a way that you tracked things in a nuanced way. I feel like, Tess, your writing was processing through
For sure.
heart.
For sure. It always is.
Yeah. So, with that reflection, we are looking ahead and focused in on 2023. And as our listeners know, we have a tradition to choose a word of the year. We are going about it in a different way this year. No pomp and circumstance. No dramatic Instagram live. Although, I saw my time hop the other day when we did the whole Christmas episode, and wow.
It was fun.
It was fun. So I have my word of the year chosen. Do you have your word of the year chosen?
I'm fairly certain, yes.
Oh, so it still could be changed?
It could be, but I think it's, yeah, I mean, I can share it, but I think I'll note if it changes, but I think it's a little bit like, the past few years, contemplation and equilibrium is like, this one keeps sticking,
Well, integrity sure stuck.
Oh, yeah. Yep. It was always there.
It was a strong ripple effect. Well, how would you like to do the drum roll of the word of the year?
Well, I think, listeners, if you want to pause and make a guess, do so now. This would be the point. But I think I think it would be helpful to walk a little bit through the background and then tell us. Like, what are you feeling? What are you bringing into this new year? What are goals that you have, even though that's not necessarily a word that you want to use? What are, intentions? I think the word is the intention of the year in a lot of ways. What are things you want to focus on? What are things you want to leave behind in 2022? What do you want to bring into 23? And what word encompasses that?
You want me to go first? Okay. My feedback experience was powerful and left with me with a reminder of the energy that I'm responsible for, how that affects other people, how important it is to me to whatever season or stage or year that I'm in, be very thoughtful about what that looks like. So receiving that feedback was really impactful. I also met with individual coaches who did not know one another, and I got very similar guidance from them. Some things that came up, some questions that came up that they asked me to ponder. Allison, why does structure have to be so traditional? Allison, why do you have to track things in a way that looks like how everybody else tracks? Like, why are you attached to a spreadsheet, you of all people? What about a storyboard? What about thinking about truly what you want and knowing that it's up to you to make those decisions? A lot of things, just like chapter. I'll give a little backstory. My word of the year chapter would have been story, but my dear friend Kristen named her daughter Story, and I didn't feel like I could infringe on the beautiful name that she had given. Miss Story is absolutely everything that is that word. But I realized that chapter had, some of those kind of waterfall words that came along with it. Chapter story, chapter narrative, chapter new, chapter closing, all those things. So this particular word I landed around because structure does not have to be traditional. And I've started to think about the words home, season, relationship, family, well-being. And I think I went from waterfall up versus up here and then going to the other words and arriving at this word. So my 2023 word of the year is define.
So what does that mean for you?
I was asked recently in a meeting, if I was to look at what was successful this year, or how would I have marked success this year. I am content. I am content and really feel at home in myself and who I am and what I'm about. I feel really like I've arrived at that. This last year has been hard in ways, but so much learning and ownership of me. So when I think about the word define, I want to start defining what I want, where I'm going. What does home mean to me? What does this next season of parenting mean to me? What does it mean to be a daughter at 48 years old? What does it mean to be a sister who lives a state away? What does it mean to be a director of engagement? What does it mean to be a guide? What does it mean to be in a relationship? What do those things look like for me? And I get to decide. So I think define is going to, the word chooses you. Define is going to show up in a lot of ways that I don't yet predict. But I'm getting out of the sense of I have to accomplish something to make the word come alive. The word is going to help me define what's next.
That's good.
Literally.
Yeah, literally.
Okay, so same questions back to you, Tess.
So up until 2 days ago, I had not even thought of the next year. I had not even put my brain to task for what the next year would look like or what my intention would be or what my goals are. So all this is very fresh and still sitting a little bit in my brain. So I became panicked because we were recording this episode and I knew I needed to I knew I needed to process. I had not given myself the time to process. And as many listeners know, I take like a sabbatical. The week of my birthday, which is next week. So I leave in a few days for a 5-day trip that will have a lot of reflection in it, and planning for the next year. And so things might shift, but I went to a thesaurus, which I normally don't do.
They are the best books in the world.
I do not agree at all. I don't think of it as a book. I think of it as a guide or a resource, and it's a helpful one.
I love reading a thesaurus.
Of course you do, with your high communication. Yeah, not me. I love reading a book, like an actual one. Just, to each their own. So
we should do a poll.
There you go. So as I was thinking, despite there being a lot of pressure and at times this year being overwhelming, I think I found a lot of balance and equilibrium within it, but also feel like I gained a lot of clarity about the type of research that I want to do, like really practically. Like conceptually I knew, and things have shifted a little bit, but I think really feeling like very motivated to do the work. Not that I've lacked that, but I feel like it's always been a little cloudy and abstract and not concrete to pull it together into like a research question that I execute and answer and a paper that I write, like the really practical, my mind. And I think my previous, even my master's degree being in theology and philosophy was always so like we thought at a level of abstraction, which I love and I always sit with. Like I always sit there in this kind of grandiose, like wrestling with these big questions. A lot of research, though, and success in academia is breaking down big questions into all of the smaller questions and then answering all of the smaller questions one by one, in order to really kind of start to digest that. And so I think I gained a lot of clarity with that, and just feel like I'm in a really good place of prioritizing relationships while still prioritizing work. And so in a lot of ways, the 2023 word of the year that I'm sitting with, yeah.
Can I ask some clarifying questions?
Oh, sure. Okay.
Is your word? I really want to guess a little bit.
You can guess if you want
okay.
to. You can totally guess.
So is it direction?
No.
Is it apply?
No.
Is it clear?
No.
Am I anywhere on the right track?
You are adjacent to the track.
Oh my God. Thesaurus is not a word. You are adjacent to the track.
It's just like, I think if you're going on this track with synonyms of these words, you're not going to get there. But fundamentally, it's very similar.
Vision.
No.
Crystal.
No. I think my word of the year would be crystal. I'm sorry.
God, absolutely not.
Thank you.
I know our listeners love like this guessing, so they're shouting in their cars as they're listening to this. They're like, Allison, you're missing it. Is it action related?
It is.
It's not go.
Though it's... Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because I think it could be used as a verb, but not primarily. It's defined as a noun.
Follow? Not really following. You're ready to lead, you're ready to go, you're ready to cast off. Your ship is sailing. You are going up or down the river. You're surfing.
I mean, you're right there. I mean, now I would say you're on the right track.
Go ahead.
My 2023 word of the year, as of yet, I don't think it will change, but it may change, is momentum.
It's freaking perfect. That is perfect.
Yeah.
Especially to follow equilibrium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot that I want to carry and a lot that I want to bring with me into the new year. And then a lot that I really perceive as a jumping off point. Like, I just feel like have these really healthy rhythms that I want to continue, but not just continue them, that there's breakthrough coming within that, and building these healthy rhythms is like this base layer to be able to really step into doing this work really well and building just really great relationships and sustaining my relationships and friendships from afar, and continuing to really seek out all the opportunities that I can when it comes to funding and research and mentorship, and just there's a lot of like really I just feel like equilibrium brought me the ability to have like margin in my life, which I don't often have, and the patterns don't seem laborious. Like, they don't seem like my low discipline will get in the way and not be able to sustain them. So I feel like I'm at the point of being able to really say, okay, how do I don't like this word in this context, but how do I capitalize on what I've built? I feel like that's a little bit extractive or exploitative of my own patterns. Like, I want to sustain the healthy patterns without doing the thing that I often do, which is knock them out of equilibrium. Right.
So I know you and I know this, and I know there's such simplicity to this that when I say this, it's not going to make sense, but it will make sense maybe and sound too simple. But we can't get to the next point. You just can't speed it up. You can't get to that next action of your life until you live in the one before. And I know when I say that sounds like, yep, hello, duh, that's how it works. But you'd be amazed at how many leaders I talk to who just want to speed through.
Yeah.
And they just want to arrive at momentum without doing the equilibrium. They want to arrive at define without doing the chapter. And all of our words, if we look back,
it's crazy.
They have pointed us to now. And the other great part that I love is that we're never going to arrive. We're just never going to arrive. You just keep growing and you keep learning as long as you can. And you don't get to, like, my word is define, but it's not going to capture everything. And your word is momentum, and it's not going to just get you to the next point. But I think, of course, here I am in my very spiritual, very mystical favorite days of the year where I'm full of sparkle. You just can't lessen what happens here in sometimes the hardest of space. I had one of our staff members interview me for a leadership class that they were taking, and I got some really good feedback from that, which was I have a tendency to give credit to others. And the assignment she gave me, it was actually two people in the room, the assignment the other individual who was listening to this gave me, and she goes, I want you to come back with 3 ways that you got there. And I haven't really been able to name that because I know that I'm so lucky to have been seen and heard and witnessed in my talent by others that have helped me to point it. But you just wouldn't be where you are had you not lived the experience. And there are times I forget how much younger you are because you're so freaking wise and brilliant, and you sit in experience. You don't try to rush through it. And I know it's your context, but it's also your values and the essence of you. Like, each year has something to teach. I think you're the existential learner. And you'll sit in it, where a lot of people, Tess, they just want to speed right on through it. So I'm always grateful for this space, this container that you and I are able to share this and reflect on it. And I get to really be in the learning from you and the learning with you.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, I think for our listeners, I think our first action item is really doing a walk back through the year. What have been the milestones, the high points, the low points, what have been the lessons learned throughout the year. And then I just think this transition point always begets, any transition point. I just love the questions like, what are you taking and what are you leaving? And I think that's a helpful hinge as you reflect on the year and then look towards planning for the next is, as we look to this turn of the calendar year, what do you want to leave behind in 2022 and what do you want to take with you into 2023? So asking and reflecting upon questions like that, and then, do you have a word of the year? Do you have an intention? We always ask this, and we do hear from some people, but we'd love to hear what your word of the year is, and maybe what that means to you, and maybe how Genn and Millie can support you in that intention as well. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to episode 104 of Genn and Millie. If you enjoyed today's conversation, consider sharing this episode with a friend. To interact with us and share your responses to the questions we pose, the best way to do so is by giving us a follow on Instagram at Genn and Millie. That's at GENNANDMILLIE. Until next time.